Welcome, everyone. I am Goldie Walker, a member of the Antitrust Law Section Membership and Diversity Committee, and it's my pleasure today to moderate a stellar panel on women in leadership in the section. Our theme this year is Advocacy, which was developed by Amy Gilbert, who is the young lawyer representative for the Membership and Diversity Committee. I would like to recognize Amy for all of her hard work and dedication in putting together this year's interviews. Its success is due to her efforts and dedication. Now let's begin. This year's theme is Advocacy, advocating for yourself, your client, and other women. I will ask each panelist to provide some background information. Please state your name, your employment title, your current antitrust law section position or responsibility. Let's begin with Melissa Maxman.
Thank you so much, Goldie. I'm delighted to be here with such distinguished colleagues, and I'm honored to be invited. My name's Melissa Maxman. I am the managing partner of the DC office of Cohen and Gresser. I'm an antitrust litigator, and I am the co-chair of the Exemptions and Immunities Committee of the Section of Antitrust Law.
Next, we have Lela Hayden.
Thank you as well. I'm delighted to be here, and it really is an honor to be amongst this group of women. I am a partner at Edgeworth Economics. I'm an economist. My current position in the antitrust section is co-chair of the Economics Committee, and I have been in that position for a year, and this is the second year starting.
Thank you, Laila. Now we have Gabrielle Kuhlmeier.
Thanks, Goldie. I am Associate General Counsel of Antitrust and Strategic Projects at Verizon, and I've been in the antitrust leadership for about 8 years now. Currently, I am the Vice Chair of the Unilateral Conduct Committee, and I am a chair of the Tech Compliance Working Group of the Compliance and Ethics Committee, and am also heading the mentor program for the Membership and Diversity Committee.
Great. And now we have Melanie Aikens.
Thanks, Goldie, and thank you for having me, and glad to be part of this great panel. Always interesting to chat about these issues. So I am a partner at Bennett Jones, which is a Canadian law firm. I actually am the Washington office of Bennett Jones, and with my whole team up in Canada. I am the co-head of our Foreign Investment and Antitrust Competition Group. And in terms of the ABA, I am currently on the council. I'm newly on the nominating committee. I'm also the co-chair of the task force on transparency and procedural fairness.
Thank you. Okay. Beginning again with Melissa, if you could tell us a little about your current practice.
Sure. I'm very much an antitrust litigator. I started my career too many years ago as a federal prosecutor in Philadelphia. And so, excuse me, whereas many actually, antitrust lawyers are very comfortable with both merger work and corporate counseling, I am much more comfortable in a courtroom or avoiding a courtroom. The other thing that's unusual, or maybe not completely unusual about my practice, is that since I left the U.S. Attorney's Office, I've done mostly civil work. And so I'm equally comfortable in a criminal case or in a civil case, because the antitrust laws have the same statute for both. It can be very convenient and economically sound for clients to have one lawyer, one set of lawyers, first defend the criminal investigation, usually brought by a governmental agency, and then follow up and be able to defend the civil lawsuits that follow the criminal lawsuits, like day follows night.
Thank you. And Laila?
Sure. I provide, as an economist, either economic research and consulting or economic testimony, mostly in antitrust litigation, but also I have done so in some labor and employment cases and in some other practice areas. One of my specialties is the economics of class certification, I've worked quite a bit on antitrust class actions, and both in terms of testifying in those cases, but also I have published in the area and given numerous presentations on that particular topic.
Thank you. Gabrielle?
So my practice now runs the gamut. I went in-house about almost 2 years ago, and prior to that, unlike Melissa, I did both class action litigation and merger work, and now my position covers everything from mergers and CIDs when other parties are merging to any litigation type issues that come up, along with a lot of client counseling about everything from pricing issues to joint ventures to whatever affects any of our businesses. And then there's also a policy strategy component of where there is discussion about where antitrust is going and how this might affect the company. I'm very involved with that, working with our privacy teams, our federal regulatory teams, our security teams across all of those areas.
Oh, thank you. And now for Melanie.
Yeah, so I currently, as I mentioned, I practice in DC, but I'm just a Canadian lawyer, although I shouldn't minimize that. I do a lot of merger work, particularly on international deals, but also on purely domestic deals. I'm sort of a failed litigator, I guess. I started out as a trial lawyer and was a partner in a Toronto law firm, Davies, for most of my career before I sort of fell into antitrust, which you can do in Canada. Seems a little less common here. So now I do a lot of merger clearance work. I do conduct investigations. I do defense to third-party class actions and that sort of thing. The way I fell into antitrust was through litigation, and after a fairly significant case in the area, I went into the agency back and forth a couple of times, almost American in that, and we don't really do that in Canada. And I headed up merger review there for a few years, and then I was commissioner for 4 years, stepping down from that about 6 years ago and moving down to the U.S.
Wow, thank you. My last question on your background will just be on how long you've been in the section and what other leadership positions you've held, if you've held any others.
Sure. I was encouraged to join the section early in my career. I was an associate. I first practiced in Philadelphia, as I said, and I was at a law firm in Philadelphia. And the head of our trial department was very active in the antitrust section, and he encouraged me to get involved, so probably from the early 90s. And, excuse me, by the mid to late 90s, I was asked to be a vice chair of it was called the Telecommunications Committee at that point. It's changed. And I served as a vice chair there for 3 years. And then I rotated off. And then I moved to DC, where my practice became much more varied in 2005. And from about 2011 or 12, I was trying to figure this out, I've been active in leadership. I was on it's now called the Global Litigation Committee, or Private Global Litigation. The precursor to that was a task force, and I was on that task force for several years, and then I was a vice chair of that. And then this is my second year as co-chair of the Exemptions and Immunities Committee.
Thank you. And Laila, what other positions have you held, and how long have you been with the section?
So like Melissa, I've actually also been with the section pretty much since I started my career in economic consulting. So I think I joined the section, I want to say, as a member about 14 or 15 years ago. Prior to the leadership role in the economics committee, I was on the editorial board of Antitrust magazine. That was just a couple of years ago, and from that I transferred to the position I'm in now.
Thank you. Gabrielle?
I also joined the section, I think as a first-year associate, volunteered for a lot of committees, and then my second year I became the young lawyer representative for the economics committee. And then the year after that, I joined the Antitrust Law Journal as an editor and was on that until right now. So.
Thank you. And Melanie, how long have you been with the section?
It's a little bit different because as I said, I fell into antitrust. So I started being involved in section events in the late 90s. But then in around 2000, I started doing some work when Tom Barnett, before he went into the agency, and I did a project together, and then it all just, as these things do, float upon itself. I was very graciously welcomed. Kathy Fenton was chair at the time when I was in the agency, and it was I've kind of worked backwards, because when you're an agency official, you get the nice, easier jobs because people appreciate you don't have some of the support. So I kind of went from the long-range planning committee, which is where you often end, worked back when I re-entered practice. I was a vice chair of the pricing and conduct committee for a few years, then the chair. Then I am now, as I think I mentioned, on the council and co-chairing a task force. So I've kind of done a number of different jobs over the years, but always enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, let's start by telling the audience about advocating for yourself. What is the best advice to women for advocating for themselves as attorneys or economists? You can select whether it is for advancement in their careers, receiving better salaries or benefits, or maintaining work-life balance. We'll start with you.
You know, that's a hard question, because I was thinking back to the advice I've been given by various male and female mentors over the years. And I think the advice I would give to women is the same as I would give to men. Be yourself. Surround yourself with people who want you to succeed, who see your success as a benefit to them. It's a sponsorship issue. The practice of law, whether you're doing antitrust or anything else, is very much, most of the time, a team effort. And if you, excuse me, feel that you're supported, then how you feel about work-life balance, or how you feel about your salary, or how you feel about any number of things. Are you getting interesting work? Are you happy at work? That's part of work-life balance. You can have plenty of time with your family, but if you hate what you're doing at work, you're not going to be happy.
Dr. Haider, what advice do you have for economists out there, female economists out there?
So I think I'm very much in line with what Melissa said. I think what the advice I would give to, say, younger colleagues or you know, just generally colleagues in the profession is essentially what I've followed myself. You work hard, you try to look towards others around you that are senior to you, that you think would be good mentors, so people that you want to emulate. I think we've all learned from working that you learn a lot from working with different people. Some people you learn that you'll want to do things more like them, and then there'll be others where you'll learn a great deal from them, but maybe you learn that you want to do things a little bit differently when it comes to, say, motivating your team and so on. And so I think in general, what I would say, and the advice would apply just as well to men, is work hard, don't be afraid to ask questions. If you want to work on something, reach out, speak to someone, as opposed to feeling as though you were left out of the process or you were not given some opportunity. I think we have a lot of responsibility as you're further along in your career to try to make those conversations happen, and I think we'll probably talk about that some more a little bit later in this panel.
Gabrielle, what advice do you have?
So I think my advice for women to advocate for themselves is, number one, value yourself, because I think a lot of times we do go in, we work hard, and we're always focusing on what we could have done better, what we could have, what more can we do, what other things, and we don't really take time to pat ourselves on the back and savor the fact that we just killed it and we did do this, we accomplished something, and take the time to reflect on and find things that you can be proud of. You checked off 5 things off your list, even if there are 20 still on it, you got those things done. And I think just remembering that you are doing things that are furthering your career, you're learning, you are having these experiences, and all of those things are valuable not just to yourself but to your colleagues, and you're contributing. I think it's important to remember that, and remember that also in terms of work-life balance. Take the time to work out, do whatever you need to clear your head, have those things. I think the valuing yourself kind of goes across all of those different areas. And then the other thing, I think, in terms of, advocating for yourself is lean into awkward. Like, take those opportunities that feel like I really don't want to, self-promote or ask for that opportunity or do that extra thing or reach out to that person. Just do something that feels uncomfortable, and you notice very quickly that nobody else cares. It wasn't uncomfortable for anyone else. And most of the time, you'll create these opportunities that, turn into other opportunities for yourself, for other people, and it's kind of spreading the value across, a lot of different areas that you're working in.
Thank you. And Melanie, what great advice do you have for?
Well, the very first thing I had written down on my scrambling little notes was be yourself. I think, and I also I'm just going to be kind of bringing together some of the thoughts that have been shared, which I agree with all of them. You watch a lot and pick up the qualities from different things, pick and choose what you like about different people's styles, rather than try to be somebody else. Always try to be yourself. Be human, be humble, not too humble. I mean, I think women have a disposition to sometimes devalue their currency a little bit naturally, because we've been brought up, at least in my generation, to do that. Just remember, you have a right to be here. You're here for a reason. You have a right to be here. Sit at the head of the table if that's where you're supposed to sit. Don't shy away from it. Take the long-term view. I mean, I think this is something that there's wonderful conversations going on right now about things that we didn't talk about when I was coming up in the late 80s and early 90s. And that's fantastic that they're happening. At the same time, there's still going to be things that happen that, not that they should, but at some, on the minor stuff, you just kind of, in my view, is a little bit let it go. Life's really short. There's good things, there's bad things in everybody's experiences, men and women, and just try to get on with the business of the work that you love. And you shouldn't be doing this if you don't love this, by the way, because you do it way too much of the day. I agree with this, lean into those opportunities and those things that make you uncomfortable. The best things I've done are the things that people are going, why in the world is she doing that? I mean, I can't seem to hold a job down for very long. I move around a lot, and they're not necessarily the most obvious things to do, but to me, they inspired me in the moment, and I took the chance and I did them. All of them intimidated me enormously, or I wouldn't have probably done them. So I think you learn so much about yourself, and you become a far better lawyer. And I think what we ultimately, well, Laila in a different way, but we all aspire to be counsel rather than just technicians. And I think if you do those things and you take yourself out of your comfort zone, you have a much greater chance of building the confidence that allows you to do that. The last comment I guess I would make is, the only one I have that's actually uniquely to women, I think, is be alive to, it's not a uniquely women risk, but because I think, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, I think women can tend to be very, very organized, and we're very appealing. At least we self-select those who go to law school. And we can be very appealing for controlling that part of a file. Just be very careful not to become a permanent junior. Make sure that you push for those opportunities that may not so naturally come, because I myself can even find myself gravitating towards a young woman who's just fantastic at getting from A to B and the food to the soldiers. Just be really careful, and I'm very careful now because I recognize it, but I think it's a risk. It's because you're really good at something, but you just don't want to lose out your opportunities. I think the last thing I would just say is government service is like the thing that has made the difference in my life as a lawyer and as a person, and just something to consider. I think you have wonderful opportunities in the United States to do that. So something that I guess that would be an advice I would give to a young woman who is looking to excel in our area.
Well, thank you. Great advice from everyone. Now, I wanted, if we could, to take a look at what has been your experience finding and working with mentors and sponsors within the section that has helped you to advocate for yourself. We'll start with Melissa.
Yeah, my experience is a little different in that my experience of the section is it tends to be somewhat DC and New York centric. That's a gross overgeneralization, but antitrust laws for large cases, bet the company litigation, it's not completely litigated out of New York and DC, but I do know that when I was in Philadelphia, I wasn't getting the same types of cases that I get referred to me now that I'm in DC. And so when I was in leadership before, when I was in Philadelphia, I was somewhat removed from the day-to-day workings. Now, I know we can get better in that, and I think we are getting better at that. I think that since I've been in DC, I've had a number of friends who had worked in the government in DC at DOJ or at FTC like you did, like you do. And one of my dearest friends is a woman named Melanie Sabo. She's since retired because she's been ill. But she was the one who said, oh, come on, Melissa, you can do this, you can do that, get involved here, get involved there. And I can name any number of people whom I've met through the section who have really taught me the ropes. Amanda Waite and Christine Summers leap to mind, giving them a shout out, because they schooled me, even though they're probably 15 years younger than me, on exactly what it is the ABA antitrust section is looking for, what you need to do to succeed and what you need to do to move along, and the benefits of it. I know so many more people now within the section. I am thought of for referrals when there are conflicts or when somebody needs somebody to handle a witness, because I meet them in the section, I work hard in the section, and I like to think that people think that I'm reliable when they assign me something to do. Turning back to that geographical issue again, we had on the Exemptions and Immunities Committee a young lawyer, he's not so young anymore, from South Carolina. It's a man, and he got very involved because I met him on a case and I sort of needed somebody to help me out with some stuff. And I realized that there were no members of leadership from South Carolina. And this year he's a vice chair and he's here, Travis Wheeler. So I think as the world becomes more electronic and smaller, it's much easier for those of us who are in Philadelphia and South Carolina to take more of a leadership role. And I encourage both young men and women, wherever you are, to get involved, put the work in, because there's no such thing as a DC-centric or New York-centric antitrust practice anymore.
Thank you. And Laila, what has your experience been finding and working with mentors or sponsors within the section?
So I think my initial involvement in terms of, I was a member for a very long time, but I was invited to speak at, speak in committee programs or at the spring meeting. I contributed to one of our handbooks, and then I've moved on to assisting and contributing to other publications. And I think for each of those opportunities to come my way, I don't think I myself know by name who that person was that thought of me or encouraged someone to reach out. They're obviously out there in the section, and I'm grateful for them. I mean, John Jacobson certainly is someone that comes to mind as I think just someone who's been a very strong ally, I think, in some ways, in terms of encouraging involvement from younger economists who are women, and I presume younger women lawyers as well. So I've had a great experience in the section, and I think now that I am much more involved in this particular capacity that I'm in now, we're very dedicated when it comes to committee programs to the diversity policy with respect to making sure that the panels that you put together, whether it's at the spring meetings or otherwise, have diversity in terms of not just gender and race, but also in terms of viewpoints. And of course, I think you do get diversity in viewpoints once you have diversity amongst that comes through gender and race, because the world is changing, and more when we look for answers to solutions, it's about making sure that different viewpoints are represented. And so I've had a great experience in the section with people reaching out. So.
Oh, great, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Gabrielle?
So for me, I initially became involved in the section because I was very busy at my law firm, but I was busy writing briefs and I didn't have as much people interaction, and it seemed like a good way to get exposure to a broader set of competition issues than just the narrow case that I was working on. And as soon as I did that, as soon as I showed any kind of interest, one of my mentors at my law firm at the time, Mandy Reeves, became a big advocate for me to be more involved in the section, and it was kind of a two-way street where she then advocated on my behalf to the partners at my firm. She also helped me get the position on the Antitrust Law Journal. I had a fantastic mentor through the ABA mentor program, Tara Kozloff, that just has been a great mentor, friend, you know, experienced on everything from work-life balance to, you know, competition issues and so forth. And then just the network of peers has also provided a lot of mentor and sponsor opportunities where there are people that I got to know through things like the spring meeting, through things like the post-annual, and you know, now it's been 7-8 years, and we, you know, stay in touch throughout the year, and we look out for opportunities for one another. And I think that that's been one of the most valuable things, being part of this community, that it's really spotlighted opportunities that exist that I would have never heard about otherwise, whether it's conferences or speaking opportunities, cases, even, you know, in-house positions. And I think having that network and finding, you know, whether they're official mentors or just peers that support you and that, you know, advocate or, you know, mention you to other people, whether you know them or not, I think has been a massive boon to my career.
Thank you. Now, for Melanie, what has your experience
So-
been with mentoring and sponsorship in the section?
Well, I'm indebted to the section on many levels. In terms of mentorship, I was first brought to be involved by Howard Feller, who I am forever grateful to. He got me involved in a project with Tom Barnett before he went into the agency, who then became a huge supporter and friend. Probably, you know, not long after, it was more in the sense of mentor/peers, I guess, as I took the position at the agency. But in that role, I'm equally indebted to the section in terms of, as head of my agency, took a lot of ideas and inspiration from the work that was either initiated by the section or was something that the section was participating in. Taught me so much about what was going on in a much busier and active jurisdiction than my own. I was given great opportunities in terms of meeting peers in the U.S. and getting to understand some of the controversies here, such that I could then sort of translate them, take them back home, do a Canadianized version of them if I could do it. I mean, we brought in a second request system in Canada while I was commissioner, which was completely and utterly modeled on the system here, and I wouldn't have understood it probably as well had it not been for the friends that I could just kind of corner at a post-annual and grill for just like, how does that part work, or how do you deal with the fact you have so many custodians, or, you know, how it was at the time that Debbie Majoris was still at the FTC, who, you know, I shouldn't call her a mentor because that makes her sound old, and she's not much older than I am, but she is a huge mentor to me, and she gave me some good ideas in terms of bringing in guidelines when I brought them in. So just professionally hugely indebted, but also the friendships that I've made in the section among the women and, you know, everybody. We have a network of women, we really do, and it is spectacular. Some of my closest friends have really, we've forged our relationships at post-annuals and midwinters, having moved to DC and not having had an automatic community. So it's really been my home as I've made my many transitions between government and private practice, between Canada and the United States, and I'm very proud to be a part of the section.
Thank you, thank you. Next, we will discuss advocating for your clients. I'm going to ask 2 questions, and feel free to answer it as you like. The first is, how can women best advocate for their clients? And if you want, you can provide a few approaches women can use to obtain the best result for their client. And my second question is, how has your involvement and in leadership and just your involvement in the section influenced your ability to advocate effectively for your clients?
So with respect to how to best advocate for your clients, I don't think that women and men have different ways of advocating for their clients. I think women and men have different ways of interacting with the universe, that they are other people or anything. And so as a woman, I bring to the table my experiences as a mom, as a daughter, as, you know, a sister, that men don't have. But I do think it sort of gets into a larger sociological issue about whether or not men and women really are men born more pugnacious, and do they crash their cars into the wall because they want to, and do girls pick flowers because they want to, or are we socialized into it? I don't mean to make light of it, but I do think the more that is written and the more you read about the different ways that women and men do anything, be a doctor, be an economist, be a lawyer, are rife with controversy. Different people, different women see things differently. I have found being a woman in many ways was a benefit to me, because when I went to law school at Michigan in the mid-'80s, only 30% of my class were women. So when they want diversity on something, I was a good student, I think I'm a good lawyer, but I also happen to have ovaries, and that's a nice thing. And so, I'm sorry. But, which I will use for any lawful purpose. If somebody wants an articulate person who happens to be a woman, put me in, coach. So I don't mean to make light of it. I brought up earlier, and then I'll stop joking, but there was an article in The Atlantic written by Lara Bazelon just this month, September 2018, and she writes about the differences, how to be a trial lawyer as a woman. And it has caused more ruckus in the women's community than I've seen, because she talks about things that have happened to all of us. Being called a young lady prosecutor in front of a jury by a judge who knows my parents and likes me, but is somewhat demeaning because he almost was patting me on the head when I'm trying to put somebody in jail. I think the world has changed. I think you have to be who you are. And for me to try to be a man or try to be overly aggressive, or to try to be taller than I am, or to try to be, anything, it doesn't make me credible and genuine in front of a jury. And I think if you know your stuff, the most important thing is for the jury to trust you. And if a jury trusts you, you're 90% of the way there.
Thank you. Gabrielle, can you provide any ways that women can best advocate for their clients, and how your involvement in leadership in the section has possibly influenced your ability to advocate effectively?
Sure. So I guess, I would just react to what Melissa said a little bit, in that I feel like the conversation has shifted a little bit in the last 2-3 years, even from talking about women leaning in and acting in certain ways. And, even when I was coming out of law school, there was literally a session on, what to wear in job interviews, what to wear, in the law firm and so forth, to be taken a certain way. And I feel like now there's much more of a trend towards be yourself, be comfortable, do what makes you act naturally, so you're not so preoccupied with being somebody that you're not. And I think that it's a welcome shift, and I think that there are some differences, at least that I've seen, between men and women, especially more junior men and women, where there seems to be a little bit less confidence from more junior women as opposed to more junior men. And then that seems to, there seems to be a moment that you hit where, you have the confidence as well. And so that's why I think, my advice earlier on value yourself is try to realize that, you are supposed to be there, you do have value, and it's not because you have to act like a man, and you can actually, be yourself. But in terms of how women can best advocate for their clients, a few things that I think most women, and again, all women are different, and I think that, I don't want to overgeneralize, but I think generally we are really good at seeing things more strategically. So for example, I at home am very good at planning our weekends and cramming in as many different activities, and all 3 birthday parties, and all, the different kids' activities, and our social engagements, and getting in work, and doing all of those things. And if it were up to my husband, we would do one thing. That would be it. And I think that as women, we are really good at seeing bigger pictures, seeing opportunities to multitask, to cross-pollinate different things, to figure out ways to be more strategic. And I think that that can also serve us really well as advocates for our clients. And I've seen that a lot being in-house, that you're not just interpreting the law or being a technician. You have to think very broadly about your business. And in a lot of cases, for example, in the case of Verizon, we have multiple businesses. And so I have to think about, the balance about how this is going to affect not this business, not just this business where I've been asked this particular question, but how, what's the impact of the other businesses that we have, and what's the immediate impact? How do I communicate this to regulators that I might have to, present a certain position to, while also still advocating for, our company in the most effective way. And it's keeping, juggling all these different balls and thoughts and the different strategies and being strategic, I think is something that being a woman has actually been very beneficial, because this is something that I do all of the time. And being comfortable in doing that, I think, allows you to be a particularly effective advocate.
And Melanie, how can women best advocate for their clients?
Well, I was just, I was reflecting on this and listening to Melissa's comments. I think, we're pretty close to peers, and it's interesting. I think, I said earlier, I hope I don't get in trouble for things. We didn't tend to talk about these issues as much. Now we do, and I think that's terrific. It's hugely welcome, and it's hugely right. But I think, even today, an experience as a woman is different as a woman lawyer versus a male lawyer. And I'm not saying it's bad or worse. It's just different. I think back to when I had my first child. I was in my late 30s, and I was absolutely determined. I'd seen so many women peers who were really capable and good get derailed for various reasons, but a lot had to do in my perception of it at the time, which may well not have been correct, but that the moment that you're pregnant, you're perceived differently. Your commitment is perceived differently. So what I did, I think back on it and I shudder because it was ridiculous, but I hid the fact I was pregnant for as long as possible, which you can do the first one. So people just thought I was gaining weight, and I was so old, people figured I wasn't going to have kids. So I got away with that for like 5.5 months. And so my goal was be publicly pregnant for as short a time as possible, and then come back to work after 4 weeks so that people realize that you're committed. I think nobody has to do those silly things anymore, and I hope that that's the case, that people don't, because that was just probably more in my head by then even, in being the, the early 2000s. But by the time I became commissioner and I had my second, partly because I was commissioner and I had that kind of role of authority, or at least I assumed that role, which wasn't me but was the role, I actually put pictures of my kids on my desk because it humanized me. And I actually think that, that's where we are now more, is that it does humanize you. Not that everyone has to have kids, but just that you don't have to be afraid of people knowing. I did, though, even at the time I was experiencing it, again, a little bit more like put me in, coach, whatever the terms, like just put me in. I like that. That's very much how I thought about it. And I just thought, there are advantages here. If I get up, and I was a trial lawyer at the time, when I stood up, I sounded differently from everybody else in the courtroom. And so the audience was mine to lose, because I sounded different from the same voice they'd been hearing for the last however long, droning on. So I thought that was I felt it. It was tangible. I also felt with witnesses. It would depend on the witness, but you could take them down the garden path because you didn't seem nearly so threatening as that aggressive guy who just questioned them. You could be cutting their heart out and they didn't even realize you were coming at them. So there were ways that you could really capitalize on the fact that you were different, and I didn't feel any shame in doing it. You got opportunities to speak. It reminds me very funnily of an experience I had. Nadia Calvino, who was Deputy Director General in Europe and head of mergers, and she's gone on to greater even things and practically running the commission now. But she and I sat on a panel with Sheriff Posen a few years ago, and she just jumped down my throat when I said, because it's a very European view of feminism, that when I said, I'm sure I got opportunities to speak because I was a woman, and she's like, no, you earned those on your own merit. And I'm like, it's not that I didn't earn them. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm just being realistic. And I think that's been my sort of motto, is be realistic. Take the good with the bad, because there's always going to be bad in everybody's experience in their career. So, I think you need to be yourself. Again, I think Melissa pointed to this. If you're not yourself, people will perceive that. and it will not be effective, whether it's a jury, whether it's a boardroom, wherever it is. You can't, just like a golf game, you can't hide who you are for 5 hours. That's why it's so effective as a business tool, because you reveal who you are. And if you don't approach it by being yourself and you try to be somebody else, I don't think it's effective advocacy. So I think, there's so much we could talk about, but I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for providing such good advice for advocating for your clients. But lastly, we're going to turn to advocating for other women, okay? So I will ask Laila, how can women support other women in the profession?
I think that's a great question, and I think it's a really important one, and I hope that many of us are really reflecting on that as we go about our everyday lives. I think it is very common when you look around in your own workplace or just in your own experiences that there are bottlenecks around. So there could be that there are some very talented young men or women, but I realize we're focused here on women, talented women that may not have received certain opportunities, or they were just perhaps they're really well known for being very organized, but you're very interested in taking advantage of that skill, but not really looking to push them forward, I think, to go with that past example. And so I think it's really crucial to reach out to other women. I think it's very much, I consider it a real responsibility of mine to reach out to my junior colleagues, or even actually my peers, and have conversations about whether, where they think they see their career going, what else they're looking to do, what ideas would they like to work on, what are things that they might think that they would benefit from that didn't come their way. And I think those are active ways that you can deal with some of these bottlenecks around and really provide opportunities. So I think I myself, I know, have benefited tremendously from, whether we talked about opportunities in the section, but also just in my career. I've had some terrific male mentors. I've also had female mentors. And I think the most important thing you can do is give back and continue that process, and hopefully never tire of that, because that's what it's all about, is to help other talent rise up and make a contribution, and the world works best that way.
That's some great advice. Thank you. Gabrielle, how can women support other women in the profession, in your view?
So I think one of the most fundamental things that we can do is realize that it's not a zero-sum game, and that really when we support each other, we are creating more opportunities for everyone, and we are not losing out on an opportunity. I think that, that at least there is a perception that, women can a lot of times be less supportive of another woman than even, men are supportive of women. And so I think one of the things that I found incredibly heartening over the last 2 years in particular is that I've seen so much momentum of women supporting each other, and seeing how that has created these forces that are really creating opportunities, making changes, and delivering amazing results for clients. I think one of my friends recently made partner, and I worked with her husband at my old law firm, and he made partner at the same year. And she said that one of the remarkable things was that as soon as she made partner, all of her girlfriends who were in-house, who were in different opportunities, said, come, let me introduce you to this person. Let me introduce you to, the general counsel at my company. Let me introduce you to so-and-so. And her husband had 0 of his friends who, all went to prestigious law firms and law schools, and you had those same positions. But I think that there's a recognition now of how much we can support each other, and I think that there are many opportunities to do that when we don't, view the world as zero-sum. I think being there for each other, whether it's creating opportunities and mentioning one another, and reiterating a point that another woman has made, for example, but also just, having lunches and talking through issues so that you realize it's not you, or so that you have an outlet, so that, you get over the humps when things are hard, because sometimes our jobs are really hard. And I think having that network of support really makes you realize that we can do this and you can stay in it. And I think that we lose less people that, if they don't have to work, they might not. But if they have a supportive network, I think that there have been studies that show that you're much more inclined to stay in that. And so I think we have a lot of opportunities just by, being a good human to help people. And then, referring business. And so one of the things that I love at Verizon is that we keep very close tabs on our diversity statistics. How many women are we engaging as outside counsel? How many diverse lawyers do we have on tap? And when we see that, we're hiring a law firm, or we have a law firm that is doing work for us that doesn't have women, we tell them this ratio, women or diverse candidates, that ratio needs to change, because this is something that we really value. And I've seen, even in my short time at Verizon, a number of situations where people are getting opportunities because we've said you need to give people those opportunities. And I've heard stories about the same kinds of things happening in courtrooms where the judge has said, the judge will be a woman and she will say, I want to see your junior woman lawyer advocating. I want to see this person actually making arguments. And so I think part of it is stepping up and speaking up and saying, like, I want to see a woman, not just doing the organizational, I don't want you to just bring along a woman. I want to see a woman actually getting substantive experiences.
Well, thank you. Melanie?
So, I share your view. I think, it is a responsibility that I take seriously. I mean, my mentors, and I had great mentors, were mostly men, with a few exceptions later on in my career. But, there weren't many women to turn to in, the late 80s, early 90s. And frankly, they'd had it even tougher. If I think the stories I could tell would make your hair curl, I think they could probably outdo me. But I've been the beneficiary of the mentorship, and so I think I probably feel I'm a more valuable mentor to a woman, just because I've had that experience. Although a lot of my team are young men, and I really enjoy mentoring them, and they're just like so different, because this whole millennial thing is confounding to me. But I really enjoy mentoring them as well, and I'm finding that at least with these young men, there's a much greater sensitivity to these issues. They're just not like my peers were when I was young, who were, all smashing cars and sharp elbows. There's a much, I think they're absorbing some of this, at least I hope they are. I think, I can offer some comfort in those tough times, because we all have tough times. I think women still suffer from the fact that everybody has ups and lows, ups and downs in their career. When women have those downs, it's really tough, because there's this off-ramp that's incredibly credible, and people might even think they're better people for taking if they go and stay home with the kids. They may be getting pressure from all sorts of people in their family to do that. To really stick with it through those tough times is something that I sort of try to look out for and try to help where I can. We can also discuss the fraud complex, which I think afflicts many more women than it does men, in terms of really understanding they have a right to be here. To young women, in terms of actual tangible advice, I remember it was a man who gave me this advice, but I think it's really good. You want to do something, and I mean, everybody's here at the section is doing that, but the idea, the metaphor was, take the football to the field and a game will start. Take initiative, plan a conference, stretch and pretend you're an expert in something. Call up people, get a conference going. I mean, God knows we have enough conferences in Antitrust, but in some little area like regulatory litigation or something where you can draw on your expertise, people love to be asked to do stuff. They remember that you asked them, they get this opportunity, and then all of a sudden your profile has enlarged. And then I guess I would just say personally, don't be a victim. I mean, nobody wants to spend time with people who are looking at the world through a half glass full, or I've got a chip on my shoulder. I guess, a theme of my life has been, let it slip off. Try not to dwell on it, because you're going to be a happier person if that's the way that you approach it. Not to say that any of these things that are hard should happen, but just find some confidants, find some friends to talk to, and work through it that way, and work through it so that you're not left a bitter person. treat people properly and recognize sometimes where the real value is being added. And I can just take this section as an example. I mean, look at the women on the staff of the section who do what they do, and they do such an amazing job. And I honestly don't know, but my very strong suspicion is that they have been as helpful in promoting me to opportunities to do things here as many of the lawyer members. So I think, you know, recognize and be nice, not nice, but be respectful of people and appreciate people. It always pays dividends. I think you mentioned about women looking for women. Amy Manning is someone here who I know does that actively. She's done it with me. I mean, she's amazing. There are women around here who will do that. Christine Varney, who's never been active in the section, but who was my peer. She was the head of the Antitrust Division when I was. You know, she's incredible. Sheris Posen, incredible. Renata Hesse. So find these people, but don't just ask them to be your mentor. Do something for them. Figure something out for them. Take some initiative and plan something. Because I personally don't like, and I'm sure you guys have had this experience, if someone just says, I'd like you to be my mentor. Well, I don't have a lot of time to do that, and I'd love to. But you got to show me, give me the goods, lean in, do something. Don't just ask me to help you, because you know, the women that are doing this are pretty busy, and it's going to be hard to get their attention. So I guess
be your own advocate, right?
Yeah, be your own advocate, and I think we're at a tipping point. We have enough women now, and a lot of them have got their profile and their credentials through being willing to do public service, and I think that's actually a secret sauce we have. We don't necessarily, I'm not saying we're not material, God knows I'm plenty material, but I think you know, we have a willingness to look at our accomplishments measured by different metrics, and making that choice to go in-house or to go into government, to do something different, I think it pays huge dividends. But is also maybe something that's a little bit of a competitive advantage, because I think we're a little more willing to do it and take the pay cut.
Well, thank you. I just have one last question, and that is, you know, how have you advocated for women, or if you could provide just one example of things that you are championing for women, or something that you'd wish people would take on to help with advocating for women in the section, or in the, whether it's happening in the section or in the profession. If you can start, Laila, by providing us something that you're championing now for women in the profession.
Sure, absolutely. So I think I had mentioned earlier, so I won't spend too much time on this so I don't repeat myself, but one of the goals for me, certainly as a co-chair of the Economics Committee, has been to make sure that, you know, we're really committed to the diversity goals when it comes to committee programming. And and also, you know, we are always trying to get more people involved in the Economics Committee and in the section. And so the one thing that we've done, and I think I would like to say fairly successfully in the last section year, is to really try to engage young attorneys, young economists who maybe otherwise would not necessarily be asked to be on the panel and so on, and really try to reach out to them. And I think they're great benefits, because they are very close, whether it's young economists or young lawyers, to the work that is being done. So let's say we're talking about something in the context of, you know, economic analysis and litigation. These young economists are on the ground working. Similarly, the young lawyers were very much, you know, a very large part of handling these cases. And so that's something we've been very committed to doing, and I've you know, gone out of my way to make sure that we have young women on these panels, and or young lawyers, just so we can sort of move the ball forward.
Thank you. Gabrielle, what efforts are you championing?
So I feel like, you know, this is kind of my mission to try to help lift up women, and because I feel like I've gotten so many opportunities. I also feel like it's so much of a two-way street, where every time that I help another woman, I feel like I get it back, and, you know, I think that it helps all of our careers. And so I genuinely do believe that it is not a zero-sum kind of thing. I think that, you know, it kind of grows all of our influence and power and job satisfaction and, you know, overall happiness. So I mentor women in the section. I'm very involved with the mentor program, as I mentioned. But I think, you know, one of the things that I really try to do, and this is kind of part of the leaning into awkward, is that I try to mention it to men, and I try to point it out, you know, when as much as I think, sometimes you do get an opportunity to be on a panel because you're a woman, I still see so many panels, less in the section because I do think that, where we try to be very focused on it, but there are so many different antitrust conferences around the world, but put on by lots of different organizations, and I was at one recently where every single panel had 6 to 7 people on it. Not one panel had more than one woman, and most of the time the woman was the moderator. And so, it was not shocking. I mean, it was frustrating, and I, give credit to one of the women that spoke up and said, "I'm the token woman on this panel. This conference will do a better job next year of having more women." But I think that being the person that kind of points that out, and I think you can do it in a very gentle way, or a very, non-confrontational way that actually gets people to think about these things. I recently was at a training with it was kind of a media training course, and every single example was of men. And I just pointed out to the person that, are there ways that women should be different, because every single one of the examples that you're showing are men, and he apologized profusely and hadn't even noticed that it was all men. And I just got an email from him 2 days ago that said, I've updated my program in the last couple of weeks because of what you said, and I just had a session with the chief diversity officer of a major company who was really thrilled with my presentation, thanks to you. And so I think it also is the kind of thing where it's not, you're not, trying to knock people down or say, demanding that you're, sexist or something like that because there isn't enough diversity, but that actually this is good for business, this is good for everyone, it's good for diversity of thought, it's good for having more creative solutions. And I think that, thinking about it that way should make us more emboldened to speak up to men and women.
Those are great efforts. Melanie, what efforts are you doing to advocate for women or championing for women?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I still continue to, I had a fantastic female team around me at the Bureau in Ottawa, and I have still maintained a very active, in fact I was almost late, well I thought I was going to be late for this because I was writing back some advice of what she should do in the wonderful world of Ottawa, which is kind of like DC. But so I'm very kind of active on a personal level with a few people, just trying to make sure that they don't get held back. I still get a lot of invitations to be rolled out, purely because of the job I had, I'm sure. But when I can't, I try to always find a woman candidate to replace me, and ideally a younger woman, because my peers all have lots of opportunities. Renata doesn't need more invitations, but some of the younger women do. I'm involved in the WCN. There's another informal network that's in its infancy that I'm participating in, which is a women's network, sort of a safe place, but not a let's talk about how to work balance, but more talk about how do we work with the situation we have and advance one another's, well, more looking to the younger women, try to help them advance. Outside envelope, I'm active in an organization, DCVLP, which is a volunteer lawyers project in DC, representing victims of domestic violence, and that is an issue that I have increasingly found resonates with just about everybody. It may not be their own personal experience, but we all know that we're surprised when we find out how many people we know have had issues that they've had to get through, and it really, I think it opens people up in a way that they're able to communicate with one another in a very candid way about what their other challenges in life might be. So I found that to be even just doing the connecting of the law firms with the organization, and not just the women, but a lot of them being women in major firms who don't get a chance to do something as meaningful as that on a day-to-day basis. Not that mergers aren't so meaningful, but something so human and so deeply important. I found that to be a way of connecting with younger women, and then that just leads to conversations. A young economist and I just had lunch on Friday that Lauren Stiro, who is another great promoter of women, she's at NERA in White Plains. She'd asked me to meet with her, so we just went out for lunch, and I just tried to share with her, not scare her, but share with her, some of the challenges she can expect, but also that there is a network of people out there, and I just said, if I don't call you back with something, because she really wants to get involved in the ABA, I said, if I don't call you back, you bug me in like 2 months, you email me, and we'll make sure that we find something for you to do here if you're that enthusiastic. So I guess they're just things at the margins and not a very organized way, but something that I do try to look for opportunities to do.
Well, I appreciate that you all shared your current efforts, and I know they'll come to fruition. I certainly appreciate and thank the stellar panel for participating today. And you can look for this podcast to be posted on the section's website as well as on our YouTube channel. Thank you all for tuning in, and have a great day.